All right, I bought myself some more time just in case this class bleeds over a little bit. So let's jump right into the Q&A. If you got questions, I don't have answers. You guys have
I've
made a
got
mistake.
loads of questions, man.
All right, go for it.
Um,
You're
so I've been
like,
thinking
actually, I
about,
don't know. I'm sorry,
you
go
don't know
ahead.
what. So I've been thinking a lot about shape design and how to work on them. The graphic read too. So I was wondering if you could perhaps give us some tips on what to study and how to study resources and stuff like that, on this topic. I just
Yeah,
again
cool.
graphic read or shape design.
Yeah. Before I do though, I feel like my Photoshop is acting out. Let me just do something. And it could also be my clicker, because I've been having this issue and it's been really bothering me. Pen and tablet input, or actually touch input. There you go. All right, let's try this again. Because Windows 10 had an update and it fixed something, but now I feel like it broke something.
Hmm.
Good old Windows. I love it, except when it updates.
How long has it existed?
Oh
I
my
forget.
gosh. So it might not be Wacom. It might be. Actually, you know what? How long is what?
How long has Windows existed? I forget when it was
Oof,
created.
long time ago, dude.
Perhaps late 80s.
Um,
Or,
I remember like Windows 98, so, and that was still pretty fresh. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
that's at least 22 years, right? God damn, that's so funny. Yeah,
Wait,
let's see.
what do you have in your computer wise? Because your programs are loading really fast
I
and
just got like a gaming
closing in and out
laptop,
really fast. Oh, gotcha.
and it's got the RTX 2060, I think,
Hmm.
which is pretty good. And then I got oh yeah, it's still garbage. And then I got sorry, I'm like focused on yeah, where's my Wacom tablet properties? And I got a 32 gigs of RAM,
Mm.
and then I got um like a i7. It's pretty good. It's pretty powerful gaming laptop. I got it upgraded and everything. I think it cost me
Nice.
$2,400 total, roughly. Like I think it was probably 2,600 with including tax and all that good stuff. But press and hold. Let's go to settings. Enable press and hold. That's off. Double click settings. This might be it. Okay, so let's see what's going on here, because it's like it is dumpster fire. It was giving me problems all. It could be Photoshop because right now I'm not dealing with it. Let's see. Oh, there it goes. Now it's acting weird. Yep. See how it's like dragging it? I'm just
Mm.
clicking. I'm just clicking.
Like it's click and locking and
Yeah,
then
it's now it's like
dropping it.
completely just broke. So it might be the double click. Double click is super slow. So let's bring this a little faster. And let's apply. See what happens. Oh my gosh. What are you doing? Huh? 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 Yep. Weird. Okay, let's get real fast then. And let's make the space has to be super large. Just go all in, see how that feels. Yeah, that's what I would expect. Yeah, it wasn't anything Windows related. I'm sorry, it wasn't any software related. It was my settings was trash dumpster fire. Okay, cool. This feels way better. So shape language.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people always wonder about shapes and the language of it. So whenever you think about shape language, what do you think about? When you hear that, what do you think that means?
Well, I think about, circles, triangles, squares, rectangles, and all those geometric shapes, put together in a way that creates something interesting. An interesting image or an interesting combination of symbols. That's what I think of when I hear shaped language. And I know that, each of these symbols has a different message or different messages, to convey it or that can be conveyed. But I was wondering, how could I apply those concepts effectively, and how could I learn more about them? What resources could I take, to learn from, just to be aware of what I'm doing and why I'm doing, what messages am I conveying, without even, making it very clear to the public. I mean, subconsciously, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So here's the best way to think about shape language. The best way to think about shape language is just like your regular language, right? Like, how do you think about the words that you say, the phrases that you use,
Right.
Like, where do you think that comes from?
Well, it comes from a long time of speaking practice and reading and writing together. Just exchanging with people all the time, reading a lot.
Yeah.
And trying to put those words together.
Yeah. So you're onto what I'm kind of getting at. Oh my God. Now it's like, now I feel something else is wrong. Man, it's weird. Yeah. So you're getting closer to where I'm trying to lead you. So one of the things that I like to do is, like, when I tell people, think of it like your actual language, like, think what that means in a lot of the respect that language means to us. Meaning that, like, when someone says, like, what language you speak, or when you think about your own language, like, what does that actually mean? And a lot of times people think of it like kind of what you did, which is really good, which is thinking about, like, the words and sentences and, doing all the writing and reading, and you're getting a lot of language that way, which is cool.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm talking about also just, like, the way you actually, like, talk, like the way you talk, like the accent and the phrases that you use. So, for instance, I say, you know what I mean, a lot.
Right.
And that's definitely coming from, like my dad's side of the family, because my dad is black, and from my black side of the family, they always say, nah, I mean. It's very, it's very, like, just smooth. It's not as punctual as I say it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I pronunciate a lot of the words. But nah, I mean. I'm saying,
yes.
Nah, I mean, no, I'm saying. And but that kind of phrasing, I agree with it at a fundamental level. That's why I use it a lot, right? But I punctuate, and the reason why I punctuate is because it's clear for most people. And the kinds of people that I listen to, like when I was trying to learn, that's a lot of what they would they would speak much more punctuated, right? And if you think about punctuating your speech and using the words more deliberately, it's a great tool for teaching.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, because if you're talking in like complete, slang, and you're talking in complete, idioms, and like constantly just using slurs, only other people that understand those slurs will understand what you're saying. You might as well just be speaking like a whole different language, even though technically you're speaking English, right? Like there's this movie called Snatch, and there's these characters called Pike, the Pikeys, I think it was.
Pikey, yeah.
Pikey, right? And they are just super, like, it is hard to understand what they're saying. And like there's a moment where one of the characters is like, "You like bags?" It's like, what? What'd you say? You like that? And it's so fast, so thick. And the guy's like, "Oh, dogs. Yeah, I like dogs." Because of the way they speak, they spoke so quickly, And I think that's part of the point I'm making here, that like people tend to like speak the way that they grew up, exposed to or surrounded themselves with. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Like there's like that girl, it's like "Catch Me Outside" girl, like "Catch me outside." That's a very specific slang from a very specific region in the States. So what does this all mean? Well, we'll think about that in terms of art now. Okay, let's take all of what I just said and apply it to art. Okay, so you're talking about shape language. You're talking about like communicating an idea. The problem that I have with kind of the way that you were thinking about it was not that you were wrong. It's actually very accurate, but it's like very technical.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of technicality, but I think the way I'm thinking about technicality in a negative connotation is that like you're thinking like it's to the book, like you're thinking about the grammar, you're thinking about the structure of a sentence, okay? Where I'm like saying that's part of the deal, and if I was to think about it, if I was to use that same analogy, it'd be like you got to learn form, you got to learn anatomy, you got to learn perspective. Like that's like the grammar and the format of writing and reading and all that good stuff, right? And just general speech and language. But that doesn't make art, does it?
No,
like
really,
or
no.
in writing, doesn't necessarily tell stories just because you know how
to
to put the comma in the right place and spell certain words the right way. So where I'm getting at is when I think about language in the way that I think you're looking for, think about it the more about like the way that somebody talks, like the cadence. So you hear somebody like Donald Trump, for instance, our president of our country, he has a very specific cadence, and his cadence works on a lot of individuals, right? Because the way he speaks is very very simple, very hard. Like it's like he uses very strong words. Like you hear him say stuff all the time. He's like, it's huge, it's bad, it's strong. Like he's like just
tremendous.
One word, and he just says it, and he comes up with catchphrases a lot, which are very memorable. Like Slow Joe, Pocahontas, and one of the worst ones, like the way he refers to the coronavirus, right? He's like the Kung Flu. And I'm like, dude, that's deliberately prejudice. It's definitely definitely dipping into the racism. And I actually was not offended when he was saying something like China flu. I was like, fine, whatever. We've actually called things based off of origin. That's not entirely that terrible, But then to go on and just call it like Kung Flu, that's like there's no need for that. That's completely unnecessary. But that sticks, and that kind of phrase, and that's why I think he does really well. And actually, when he speaks to his base, now the substance of what he's saying, that's a whole different argument, right? The actual points that he's making, it goes to show that he can literally say one thing and encounter it in the same sentence. Like literally, he's done this many times. And because he's so good at speaking in that way, like that, very like he's been in television. He is like a person who's like constantly been in meetings in which he had to talk his way out, right? So he's really, really good at it. Like he just is. But unfortunately, you know, being good at speaking doesn't necessarily make you competent at what you're doing, right? And so when we think about art in the same way, like you want to be able to have not only a good cadence with your art, a good way of thinking about this is like having a really refined style, let's say, right? But also have the ability that it's substantially good. Like you're designing with control. Like I'm putting shapes in the places that they need to be to communicate all the right ideas to you. You're looking at this, you're feeling, you are not confused about what you're looking at, but more importantly, you like what you're looking at because I'm using stuff like graphic read, like I'm making the hair and the skin separate very graphically. The ear, the shape of the ear also is designed well. It's not just unilaterally designed. It has structure. It has opportunity for curves, the width and length, and like that this is a seamlessly connected thing, that I didn't go more rigid. That's like me learning that I should punctuate my words so that people can understand me better, right? That's like me speaking slower and more deliberately so that I can make harder hitting points whenever I educate. The reason why I think people really like this is something you'll notice too. Now that I'm going to tell you, the reason why I think a lot of people like my way of instruction is because I do a couple of things. I pause a lot, and then I also like speak slowly, and I like will raise and lower my voice when I'm about to make a point. And I usually will say the same thing a couple times and I'll use like different words in different ways, because that way, if maybe you didn't understand the first time I said it, maybe you'll understand the second time, or maybe you understood it the first time and the second time just compounds it. And I just did it right now, you know. And you might have not even noticed it, but that's the point of.
Well, I have actually.
Yeah, and that's the point of like, I found that really helps teach. You know,
it's funny because I've been involved in language teaching for the last 10 years. That's what I used to do or still do. I don't know. I'm in this transition right now, and a lot of what you say or said, speak to me because when it comes down to communication, I think I have some experience in that field.
Sure.
Now that I'm trying to draw a little more, or a lot more actually, I see the importance of language per se in drawing too, in art, because it is a sort of communication tool, of course. So yes, I tend to get attached to technical aspects of things, but I know that art is not only technicality. It is not only.
Well, let me stop you there. Let me be very clear, because I even said this earlier, but I'm going to say it again, right? Which is, I'm saying technicality in a negative content, like in a negative context, because of the way you're thinking about technicality, right?
Oh yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to explain to you that it is technical, okay, to do it good. In fact, I consider everything that I do technical. Let's just be very clear.
Oh yeah, sure.
I do not think of anything that I do as subjective, other than the actual topic. Like if I'm drawing a robot versus monsters, or stylized versus realism, that is, in my opinion, more subjective.
Right.
Okay. And it's only subjective because people are exposed to different cultures and different experiences, and because of that, people have different opinions about different things and they see them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And for me, that is like to the eye of the beholder, right? whoever happens to see my artwork. But with that being said, there are technical skills in terms of shape language that make things look good no matter where you are in art.
Right. Yes.
That's something that I will say. And the way that I want you to think about that technically is the way I just explained it earlier, right? Which was stop thinking about more about how to get maybe like the shapes or thinking about language like the way you described it earlier, right? Like getting the paragraphs and like don't think of it like that. Think of it more of like, okay, how do you tell a structured story? You know,
right.
Like what's the beginning, middle, end? How do you tell acts of a story, right? That's the creative part of it. But there's technical elements there too. You know what I mean?
I see.
There's a tool that I used to use when I was writing stories overviews, where I would start off with the idea of, once upon a time, and this is something that I stole from Pixar. This is kind of how they start some of their things. They go, once upon a time, there was a person, right? And then you just start off with the once upon a time, and then you say until, and then the until part is usually the conflict of the story. And then you put another part of there where it's like, and then, which is another part of the story, which leads into more of the conflict. And then you put another and then you finally end it with until finally, and that's usually the conclusion of the story, right? And that's a really good structure to get the story started in an overview way. But I took it further. I added a but in there. So I was like, once upon a time, until one day, and then, but, and then, until finally.
Yeah.
And that's a technical way of telling a story, but it works. It works really well. And you can do backwards engineering. You could take it to some like very popular, well-told stories. Like let's take a look at something like Toy Story. So once upon a time, there was a group of toys who were happy with the life they had until Andy had his birthday party and introduced a whole new toy that was better and cooler than one of the leader toys, in this case, Woody, who made him extremely jealous.
Yeah.
And because of that, and then because of that, he tried to get rid of Woody, right? But as he tried to get rid of Woody, he made things worse. And because of that, they ended up becoming lost toys. Until finally, Woody came to grips with the reality that he should share Andy. He's not the only toy that Andy cares about. And that's when they finally get back and are able to work together to get back to Andy.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah.
And that's like the whole story in a nutshell. But like if you are trying to come into a story and you're just like, how do I write a story? And you're like doing detail-oriented thinking, it's sometimes hard, right? But with concept, I think the same way. I start off with a silhouette and the larger picture of the character design, Yeah. And then I start to execute. It's very similar. I like seeing macro solutions, And
do you use other languages by any chance?
No, I can speak kind of Spanish and I can speak kind of Korean.
Right.
But and I barely speak English.
Come on now.
Yeah, I just speak slowly so I can remember the words. It's actually a lie.
Because you're a communicator and you have, a very interesting sense of interaction and exchange. So I think you would be, you are actually capable of learning lots of languages. I think you'd learn easily.
Maybe. Yeah, I think the only reason why that'd be true is because I'm pretty diligent. I just have to do it. But now let's get to answering your question even more directly. Okay, so now we got like more of the philosophy behind it, more of like the macro understanding of why you should think of it like this. So the things about shapes, like the ways that you study shape language, is to study the kinds of shapes that you think are really cool, right? Like if we were to again think of it as like a language, right? If you are surrounded by your friends and family, you're going to speak like that. So you should surround yourself with the kind of art that you want to speak like. Make sense?
Yeah.
So if you have like a series of artists that you really admire, like they should always just be around. So you can kind of like it's like you're always listening to them talk. But in this case, you're always listening to them draw, you know?
Yeah.
And looking at the ways that they use shapes. Like everybody has their ways of drawing certain features of a face. And that usually can have people, that alone is how people sometimes can tell the kind of artist that they're looking at, you know?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Like if that artist is really into like manga, you can kind of see it immediately. Versus if that person's more into like traditional, whoa, what the heck? You're invoking a Topaz plugin. Return to the host actor complete. What the? What? Was this connected to Photoshop? That's pretty cool. I didn't know that you could do that. Actually, that's pretty dope.
What was that?
Nunya Business. I'm just kidding. It's a denoiser software. So if you have like really noisy images, it actually uses AI to denoise it. And I was using that for like textures and stuff. Like, so you can render out stuff in like a 3D software, but it takes years because of like the resolution of an image. But if you do a low resolution image, it's usually very noisy.
Oh yeah, okay.
So a denoiser, it's like kind of a mixture of the two, of like rendering really quickly and then denoising it in a more powerful tool. In fact, Blender actually has something like that built in. I'll show you. Let me save this up first.
Oh, cool, because I've been learning Blender too.
Yeah. So
I'm more of a ZBrush guy, but
yeah, ZBrush is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do something like this.
By the way, speaking of ZBrush, I was wondering if I could sculpt some of your concepts.
Nope.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, of course. I don't mind. All I care about is if there's a credit attached to that.
No. Why would I credit you? Man?
Oh, back at me. Sarcasm.
You can credit Tyler, who's in there, or I don't know, Johnny. Johnny be good.
Yeah. So let's say you create this scene. Cool beans. And let's actually do a couple of different materials too. Let's make this have a okay, cool. And let's just turn on the lighting. Let's remove the roughness.
People say Blender is going to replace Maya one day.
One day?
Yeah.
It's already happening.
Soon.
Yeah, not even soon. I'm thinking like already. Like
really?
It's just a matter of people stop being so stickler about it, yeah?
Big studios say, why would we train all of our staff, to learn Blender if all of them already master Maya, and that would cost us money, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, because Blender is superior in a lot of ways. It's like the automobile has been invented, and your company is like, why would anyone still drive cars when we still have horses? It's very short-sighted, Okay. In fact, if I'm an artist that works for a company that doesn't care, I would be actually pretty stressed out, because all these artists are coming in doing amazing stuff in Blender that I still have a hard time making in my software. That's not a good feeling.
I don't know enough about Blender yet, to see the difference.
Well, first of all, this is all real-time rendering right here. That's already pretty dope. But we can go further than that. We can go into cycles, which is your typical ray trace rendering, which is what you're expecting here, which is dope.
What's the other one? Is it I forget the name of it.
Eevee, but like, see, we're getting like natural ambient occlusion, natural bounce light back on top of this stuff. It's super cool. But here's what's even cooler, is that they have a denoiser tool already attached to the software, and bam.
Oh, look at that.
It's almost as if it is already real time, you know?
Right.
And you can like, obviously it'll be all noisy at first, you know?
Yeah, sure. Like any other
But
rendering.
then it removes the noise. And there's a little bit of like artifacting and this and that, but it's kind of also just showing you what it's going to look like in a real way when you actually let it cook overnight or something.
Pretty fast, yeah.
It's pretty cool. And it's all like, I'm still modeling and stuff, you know, and I can do some cool stuff like this where I can bevel these edges, which is nothing new. But within the bevel, you can do a custom profile, and then you can change it to like something like this, where it's a little bit more ornate. Let me go to a render. See that?
Yeah.
And it's still customizable. Like I can kind of still fuck with it.
That's
look at that.
That's so cool.
I mean, it only is gonna get better. This tool. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, sure.
And then
like an explosion. People are talking about it all the time.
yeah, and like bam, it's just I got this thing now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, I mean, especially if you're just trying to build your own like real quick scene, like this is fucking gangbusters, my dude. And then
one of your tutorials about shading, something like that, you know, for which you rendered or sculpted a scenario like that.
Let me show you something my friend showed me that really is fucking bonkers. So let's just do this. Okay, and now we can go into sculpt mode.
Yeah.
Because it has its own sculpting tools. I think Maya does too, so it's not like, ooh, whatever, you know? Like, no, it's still pretty cool. Let's do smooth normals, and let's do that. Okay, cool. So we have this object here, right? Let's get rid of symmetry for a second. And you're like, okay, whatever. You know, it's just a regular sculpt of some sort. You could do this, where you can add a pose. There's a tool called the pose tool, which acts like a rigged IK system. And you can
oh wow,
do this. Cool. Okay, but hold on, dude. I'm not even done with you guys. And then there's another tool called cloth tool, which you may have seen. This one's definitely got me the rounds. And you just do a little bit of shaking, and it acts as if you're messing with some sort of cloth. Now imagine if you're just trying to like create some sort of sci-fi military grade wrapping. You know, that's kind of what it looks like, right?
Yeah.
It's like, and there's different versions. So this is drag, but there's like one of my favorite ones is inflate, and this one kind of just acts like there's something coming out. You see that?
Yeah.
And that's like pretty.
Sure, that's a baby coming out of the box.
Yeah, you know, you can make some pretty impressive like abstract furniture.
So fast.
Yeah, all in like a minute.
Speak of you know, the last ZBrush, they've added these dynamic functions.
Dude, that was a reaction to Blender's cloth tools.
Was it?
Do you understand me? Yeah, they realized.
Is Blender free?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Completely.
They were like, fuck. You know? And here's the problem that ZBrush still suffers. It's not a proper 3D software, meaning that it doesn't have actual 3D lighting and 3D cameras. It's all fake. They're all faking the hell out of everything.
Yeah.
Right? And so everything you're getting out of there is just really kind of like, it's like, and it's all like, you got to like flag around in all of these different areas. And don't get me wrong, I've used ZBrush and I love ZBrush, but I know when the tool is starting to get outdated, dude. And like I said, we're back.
Organic sculptures. I can't see anything better than ZBrush for now.
No, I can sculpt better in 3D code and even in here.
Organically?
Yeah.
Organic ones?
Yes. And so
3D code?
Yeah, man. And so check this out though. Like, and this is still that I'm still in Blender. And so I'm like, not only was I able to sculpt, model, create like a real quick cloth simulation, right? I just created this like immediate scene. And it's like a little noisy, and there's like a little bit of like this kind of it's hard to describe it unless you really saw it up close. But what I actually like about it it feels painterly, the denoiser. Okay.
Mhm.
And that fact is cool because I'm a painter, you know?
Like
And so I'm
blurred,
like,
and you're just looking
ooh,
at shape.
yeah, I'm like, ooh, I can like actually use some of these artifacting, you know, in my
Mm.
favor. I'm actually excited about it, not distracted by it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You mean like
And
for doing paint overs?
absolutely. Yeah. Like I'm thinking of like how it's actually kind of saving me some time, you know? Like it's hard to explain. Yeah, if you really look here, let me zoom in and like print screen just a fraction of that while I was rendering and put it into Skype for you to see. And you'll see what I'm talking about. It's now if you go to Skype and look at that image, you'll see that it's like that denoiser. There's a little bit of like color variation that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
You know?
Gives it like a little shade gradient type thing with like some highlights and
Yeah, I think like the tryhards would not want that, right? They want to have like perfect everything, like photorealism. But someone like me who's like lives in a world like this, that's
Oh,
I do kind of like the charm of the brushstroke. You
I
get a
mean, it
little bit
has
of that
its
with a
own place,
denoiser, dude. Like say it again.
I was just saying that like each one of those things has its own place for its own time, but if you're focusing on like speed, like that's instant.
You see what I just did though, right? Like it's like you
Yeah,
learn the
it's
tool,
crazy.
you start mastering the tool, and this is something that I talked about in the morning class. And I'll reiterate here. You know, you want to spend your time learning skills, not tools. Meaning, like you
Yeah.
want to like know how to be a good artist. Like your question about shape language that started this whole conversation from the beginning. That's a good direction to go because shape language transcends the tools. You understand?
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Like the way I speak, if I was to speak it in Spanish or in Korean, like the other two languages I sort of understand, right? If I were to learn those languages, the way that I explain things would only needed to be translated, right?
Uh-huh.
Like my philosophy, my way of thinking is not rooted in in the English language, meaning
Oh,
that
yeah.
I need to speak English to be able to communicate these ideas. No, it has nothing to do with the
Of
language I
course not.
speak.
It's not every English-speaking person would think and do the same thing.
Yes.
Luckily not the case.
So it's better to put your time and effort in that type of stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because then you can just go learn the tools. Like if you guys really sat down after the class or even during the class and spent a few hours every day learning Blender, you know, just a few hours, you guys could probably learn Blender within a year at a high level. And you probably learn Blender within a few months at a good level. Do you understand?
Uh-huh.
Like you would already be able to make cool stuff, but at the highest of all levels, you probably still need a year. But that's like a high, almost mastery level is what I'm talking about. You know?
I have a question. So where would you go to learn this stuff? Because I learned Maya, but like I'm kind of leaning towards Blender because it's free. All my indie friends like it and all that stuff.
Well, let me ask you a very simple question. Where do you think you could learn it from?
Probably YouTube.
That's exactly where I learned it.
Fair.
Just Google. It's always as simple as you might think, right? Like what usually people forget to think about, which I think is really, which is why I'm glad you asked that question. You know, is it's usually the problem is the consolidating of information. Okay. See, the value of taking a class like mine or watching tutorials is that I've gathered a lot of this information and I consolidated it in a condensed way, right? Which is really nice. It's very, very convenient. And a lot of great instructors, that's what they do. That's the value great instructors usually bring to the table. They consolidate a lot of good information, you know? And so whenever people are like, where do you learn this stuff? Well, you know, you also find that a lot of great leaders, not leaders, educators, or people who are pretty good teaching, they do a lot of the same things, which is we're all pretty resourceful. We are really good at learning because we don't rely on finding a consolidated educator, right? Like when I was learning how to paint, a lot of the way I know how to paint now was not from video instruction. You understand? A lot of it was just looking at still images of dead artists, okay? And a lot of these artists did not have any instruction video or instruction tutorial online of any kind. You get where I'm going with this? Like, I just looked at their image and I was like, how the fuck? You know? And I just tried to figure it out. I remember I was talking.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was talking to one of my students about, like, because they love this artist named Phil Hale, and I do too. And they're like, well, how do you know how he paints if you've never seen him paint? Because I was explaining like how he approaches paintings. You know? He's like, but you say you've never seen him. I was like, yeah, I've never seen him paint live or even met him, you know? And it's like, well, then how the hell do you know how he paints? It's like, well, it's the same way that scientists know how hot the sun is. It's the same way scientists know how to give us the appropriate amount of vaccines. You know, it's the same way we know that the Earth is a globe, right? Without many people ever seeing it, you know? By incredible amount of investigation, right? An incredible amount of investigation.
Are you sure the Earth is not flat? You sure about that?
I'm positive, yeah. Yeah. Did I tell you guys? I think I was telling you guys why it's not flat. Or was it a different class? I forget actually.
Why it is not flat, or
yeah, why the Earth is obviously a globe.
Yeah, okay.
And it's an artistic reason. It's not actually like a scientific reason. Because I had a friend we were talking, and he was like, I've been listening to this like the Earth is flat stuff, and it's pretty convincing. And I'm like, oh boy, because it is convincing. That's why people are convinced.
How can that be convincing?
Yeah, like here's a good example of what I'm talking about. Right? There's this video about Jar Jar Binks, right? Being a Sith Lord. And if you watch this video, it goes through all the notions of all the correlating behaviors that he has that kind of makes it seem like he knew what he was doing the whole time. There's another good example. Yeah, there's another good example, which I almost believe is what led Cobra Kai to be the show that it is today, where they said, no, Daniel is actually the bully, right? And it's a very popular YouTube video. You guys should watch it. And again, it goes through the motions of why he was a bully, and it's very convincing, you know. You know what I mean? Like there's ways to be very convincing, but that's why you should be very skeptical. And so then I told him, I was like, you know, well, the reason why I'm not convinced of any of this flat Earth nonsense has nothing to do with what NASA says. Has nothing to do with what the flat earthers are saying that I just disagree with. It's just the simple fact of point lights versus directional light. Okay? That's it. And it's like, because I've been painting for a long time, and this is what he was like, oh yeah, but of course. Right? Because he's an artist too. It's like, okay, the Earth is flat. So that would mean that if the sun is here, even if I'm over here in Australia versus people over here in the States, there's a couple problems already. One, point lights like only illuminate a gradated area, and so it would be circular, the gradation, right? So it would be like if you're looking at the States, this is a perfect picture of the States, and let's just scale down the sun's effect. It would be omnidirectional, the fade, but it's not. It's lateral, right? So that's one thing. And I said, but also, even if I'm in Australia, I would be able to see the sun over chilling over at the Earth, because it would be going around in a circle, right? It would have to be, or if it was doing the other thing where it would go underneath, right?
It could die, yeah.
It would still suffer from the radial problem, and you know, places like what you call it, Alaska, or like the northern parts of the globe, right? Where the sun is just chilling like constantly in the sky. Whoops. You know,
but you think like that because you know, or you have a very good understanding of how the sun, you know, works, or how he moves in the universe, in our solar system. Sorry, I mean not
Well,
the sun.
like I said, I disregard all of that. I think of it as a directional light on a sphere, right? It's just that simple. It really is that simple. And once you go into that world, it's really easy to debunk, in my opinion, right? That alone, specifically, we don't have to go into all the science of it, the 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 radio trajectory that these astronauts and astrophysicists really have to like calculate that is obviously the other reasons why the Earth is clearly a globe, for all like that, like measurable stuff, you know. But that's like actually a great way to think about it as just as artists, right? As fellow artists, like that's one of the ways that I was able to tell him was like that's just nonsense, based off of just basic lighting principles, you know. And he was just like, that makes a lot of sense, because you can see a street light, for instance, or like a light that's, you know, illuminating the street, even though you're not illuminated by the light itself. Meaning that we would still be able to see the sun from afar, even though we're not actually being lit by the sun. Make sense?
Absolutely. And I think anything can sound convincing depending on how you make it sound, you know.
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
What you say. Yeah. So yes, flat Earth. Okay, well.
Yeah, I think it's smart to not entirely disregard it, but it's also smart to it's also smart to like kind of respect a lot of authority that came before. You know, there's a reason why a lot of people believe what they believe now, and it's not always a conspiracy. You know, it's not always. In fact, the more somebody tells me there's like a lot of people involved hiding a really, really, really crazy secret, the less I believe in it. Like, for instance, government stuff. But if you're telling me, you know, there's a few or several dozen multi-billionaire people that potentially are pedophiles, that's a lot easier for me to take into account, because there's less people to manage. But once you scale, like humans as a species, we're really bad at scale, right? We're just pretty terrible. Like you and me in a room, if we have a disagreement, you know, it's just we yell at each other, but we're probably still good friends. Yeah. If it's like my friends and then you're like some other group of friends and there's like a bar fight, you know, or we disagree, there's probably a bar fight, right? Worst thing that happens, somebody gets a bruised eye or black eye, you know? You scale that to hundreds of people, then it's like a fucking riot, right? You scale that at thousands of, you know, hundreds of thousands, then you potentially have wars, you know?
Yeah.
Or civil unrest. So you increase that number, the more I don't believe that it's that organized. You know, like in fact, that's my main criticism, is that government is like, it's actually a very conservative position, that government is really inefficient, right? But I also am not in the camp of we should just totally annihilate government. I'm saying I actually acknowledge, I agree that there's a lot of inefficiencies, but there's ways around it, because other nations have done a pretty good job, you know? This whole idea of just ultimately it's just a bad idea is kind of ludicrous, especially when we saw what happened with COVID-19. It showed all the problems on every angle about how, specifically in the States, how we managed that whole situation, to how people just completely don't think it's a real thing, to the point of where people are now going into the streets because they're being evicted. People can't afford health insurance and are getting like losing their jobs left and right, and how there's no safety net of any sort that really could handle this. Because who would have known?
There is this, you know, this misuse of the word believe, I think, that I see very often. I believe the earth is round. I believe Australia exists. I don't believe in Australia. I just, you know, have learned about its existence. You know, people have developed this concept of Australia-based.
But it doesn't exist, though. Let's just be clear. Australia is a fake news. I'm just kidding. You're like, wait, what? No. And now we hear thousands of Australians slowly disappear. This is all a simulation. But hey, let's bring this back, because I went on a little bit of a rant. But I think the original question still was a really good question. Am I using reference right now, Gangling asked? I am not, no. Reference is for chumps. No, I'm just kidding. Reference is incredibly important. You should always use reference, always. And when I say I'm not using reference, I'm really speaking to the idea, Gangling, of like, I'm not using reference externally. Like I don't have like an image on the side that I'm looking at and trying to get my visual cues from. I'm using a lot of internalized reference. Does that make sense? You can speak. You don't have to just type. I get you're trying to be polite. But does that make sense, Gangling? That I internalize this? You're muted on the Zoom chat, if you weren't aware. Or maybe you should just wait. Oh, there you go.
Memories,
I can hear you now.
like from memories, internal movements.
Yeah,
Wow.
like when you go and learn how to, like we were talking about reading and writing. Like I don't need to know the alphabet. You know, I already figured it out. I don't have to always go look at like an alphabet chart. You know what I mean?
Wow.
That's a really good way of thinking about that. Like my son, he still has a hard time with the alphabet, for instance, so he does need to. Or like multiplications, like I have a lot of like those numbers memorized, those different types of scenarios of multiplication, you know. So
Cool.
so it's the same way. Like I have like shapes and values, perspective, design, all kind of just memorized. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I am saying that you should always use reference, whether you internalize it or not. So if I'm working on something that I don't have internalized reference, then I will externalize that reference. Like we'll do what you normally will see. People gather a bunch of reference, right? Look at it, study it, and then put it out there, right?
And internal, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just to show you an example, I've been working on changing up my style a bit. And so I did this study last night, right? And this is just a sketch. This is something that I'm studying, okay? But I was looking at like 3 different references when I was doing this image, okay? But as mentioned before, I'm like trying to internalize this information, you know, so that way I can just design like this without having to always pull up reference, you know? Does that make sense?
Wow. Very good memory.
Oh no, it's takes a lot of time. I've been doing this for a long time. But what I will say though is that that is like another thing though. Like you can train your memory. You know what I mean? Like you could get better at keeping things in your mind. You know, just like anything else. If you don't like do that, right? Like if you don't constantly are putting new information in, your brain doesn't feel the need that it has to do that, right? So I have like a lot of friends who are really good artists, but they use tons and tons of reference, you know, like externally because they don't memorize anything. So what they've done instead, they developed a skill focused on being able to extract from reference really well, you know, so that they don't have to memorize shapes and stuff like this, you know. And I'm not even saying that that's bad. I'm just saying that's just how they do it. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
It's just another approach for them, where I like the kind of like seamless ability of just jumping back and forth, right? Like just I like the idea that I can just like you just give me a tool and I can make a thing. I don't have to wait for reference to be around. I don't have to explore. You know what I mean? Like I can just do a thing as we speak. You know. And it's absolutely impressive for sure, because when most people try to do it, it's very challenging. But I always try to remind them it's only impressive because it is so challenging, right? But any one of you guys can do it. It's just I have a huge head start on you. That's all.
Wow.
You know, I've been doing it for a while. Like it would be weird if I spent 10 years practicing this specific thing, right? And was really bad at it. Still, after 10 years of like straight focus on being able to internalize a lot of information, you know?
Yeah.
Like there would be something wrong with me potentially if I was actively trying to be better at keeping information in my mind and I wasn't getting better at it. This is why I'm saying it's like a magic trick on the outside, but in reality, it's just like any other magic trick. Once you learn the trick, it's just about practicing it. You know? So don't get confused. Don't think that like, oh man, like there's some sort of inherent talent that I have. The only talent that I like to think that I have is that I'm really stubborn. You know, that like I don't give in too quickly on things that I want to get good at. Like I don't let something like me being bad at something stop me from being good at it.
Cool.
Where I think a lot of people, especially I've been doing this for a while, I've been teaching a lot of people of all sorts. I think the general sense that I've gotten from people, you know, and just people that I've taught is that they can't handle the suck. They take it way too personal and it affects their growth, you know? Where I'm just like, just accept it. Remember we talked about this last class, right? I had a student in a previous class last month, and he took my class because he wanted to get better at characters, and he tried to do characters and they were really bad. And he's like, you know, is it okay if I do creatures instead? You know? And I asked him, I was like, but do you want to do characters? Like, I get that, you know, this is challenging and you're really struggling and you're not liking it. Like that's totally fine, you know? But like, do you want to be good at character design? And he's like, yeah, but like, it's just so hard. Like every time I do it, I always mess up and it's like, I fail, you know, and I really struggle with it. You know, this is kind of the way he was explaining it. And just like I talked to you guys about this, it's like the struggle is part of the deal. You're not revealing something that's wrong. You're revealing what's right. Okay. You're revealing that you're not skilled at this. That's all you're revealing. You're not revealing anything personally wrong with you as a person. It'll be weird if everything that you wanted to get good at, the first time you tried it, you were just already good at it, you know? Then you'd be weird in a different way, right? You'd be definitely special, right? And he understood that after I told him that, right? And he was like, I'm stupid for even thinking this way, you know? And then he pursued the characters from there on out in the rest of the class, and he ended up having the best characters in the class.
Wow.
Yeah, because he realized he was being dumb, you know? He's realizing like, it was like, oh man, I'm not good. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So keep doing it and you'll get good. And he was like, oh yeah, that's right. You know?
Yeah.
And I told him, I was like, how did you get good at creatures? Because he's pretty good at creatures. He's like, oh, I just did a lot of anatomy studies and this. And he basically told me what he needed to do, but with characters, you know? And then he did it and then it worked out. It's just so funny that people forget that. What? Get out of here. Get out of here. I love you, Sue. Even though you're wearing my shirt.
AJ,
Yes.
will you at any point critique our portfolios or?
Yeah, absolutely. We could do it towards the end of the class, like
Okay.
the last class.
All right.
So just hang tight.
Cool. Sure.
Hey, AJ.
Yeah.
Back on that other topic about like not taking, I guess like critiques or just anything like personally about your work. Like, how do you detach yourself from it to where it becomes just like a more of a product rather than like, oh, this is my baby, don't say shit about it, you know?
Yeah. That's a hard one, man. Because like I said,
I figured because
well let me answer it though. Let me give you an answer. It's a hard one because it's like a character trait that people think this way. I think it's a very human instinct to take things very personal. It's a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
And so it's tricky because of that specific reason. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have to do is you have to do stuff that has nothing to do with that, like the artistic ability of art, right? And
Gotcha.
so for instance, like, remember like the 15-minute stuff that I talked about, right? That's a great example where it's less about like, oh, I better do good artwork, and you're just like aimlessly painting for hours on end, right? With this one goal, do good art, right? It can get really demoralizing when you're not doing it. Where if I were to ask you fundamentally, when I ask you guys fundamentally, what does it take to become a good artist? You guys, you have to draw a lot. You know, you have to put that time in, right? Like everyone here agrees with this principle. But then when it's put into practice, like everyone just forgets. They're just like, oh, I don't want to draw anymore. It sucks. You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, but you just agreed that you should keep drawing, you know? So you need to like put different guidelines to what is actually considered quality drawing time, right? And for me, I like to do hourly times and stuff like this, or quantifiable stuff that has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with what you call it, the actual quality of my image. So you saw that image that I showed of like that more stylized artwork. All I needed to do was fill up a page of sketches, which I did, and then do a painting, which I did. And then I only gave myself the end of an episode of The Boys to do all of this. So about like an hour or so, like 45 minutes. Okay. And I was like, at the end of that show, I should stop and move on to the next thing. You know? When I was learning programming, it was like 2 hours a day minimum. You know, even if I'm just programming boxes turning, you know, or like something super basic. It was about, no, I didn't get that mileage in though. I need to get that time under tension type of stuff, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. Because that's what I'm noticing when I'm doing that 15-minute thing. I'm like setting the timer, and at first it was like I'm trying to get this arm just perfect, right? Like to where it reads clean and everything. And then in that 15 minutes, I didn't get shit done. And then I kept like doing it over and over again. And then maybe like an hour down the line, I'm like not really thinking too much of what I'm putting down in like a emotional sense, but more like, okay, that looks good there. Let me go over here and then see where I can fit a more like how much I can get into this time limit that I have.
Absolutely. So I think that's one of the ways I like to try to teach people is to just have a different quantifier. Like remove the quality part of it, you know? Even as an art director, when I work on projects with people, I've noticed that people, even professionals, have the same problem. It's just more dangerous in a professional setting because people take things personal, and it's also like their livelihood, like it's their job. And I listened to this guy talk about, you know, how people treat their employees, and he had a really good way of thinking about it that I loved, where he was like, you know, there's two scenarios. One lacks empathy and the other one doesn't. And he's like, you know, and it's no one's fault. It's like our culture has taught us this way of thinking, the wrong way. And he's like, but it's our opportunity to try to change that. And he was saying, like, you have this one group of, you have this one way of thinking where somebody's behind work, you know, like 15 hours of work or whatever, they're behind. And you go to their office and say, hey, you're 15 hours behind. You better get this figured out by the end of the week or you're fired type of attitude. And the other one is where you go into the office and say, hey, I noticed that you're 15 hours behind work. Is everything okay? Like, is everything okay at home? Like, is your life, like, things all right? You feeling stressed? Like, what's going on? You know? And one of them is, you know, like, heartless, just get it done. The other one is like, there's probably a reason why you're having a hard time, right? And maybe we can sort that out, and that maybe that will help get you back to productivity, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of that second approach, where if you are thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, I better just do this artwork, and you have this high standard of quality in your mind, then it sometimes can be a detriment, and it creates a bad relationship with your artistic growth. You know, where if you're like, it's okay, I'm just going to do 15 hours today, or sorry, like 15 drawings, let's say, today. And let's say you don't, let's say you only do 10 drawings. Say, well, why was it so hard for me to do 10? What happened? You know, It's like, oh, was I distracted or was I not feeling it? Okay, so maybe I need to create a different quantifier that tries to help me remove this type of attitude, or maybe I should address this thing that's been stressing me out, so that way I can kind of get back and stay focused, you know? And 10 drawings is still pretty good. You know, like I still did a pretty good job. Be kind to yourself. You know?
Mm-hmm.
I find that that kind of thinking and that kind of rationale is much more healthier. And it's the one that I usually encourage people to think like. Because the other one I think is not only is it counterproductive, it's really depressing and aggravating for people, you know? Make sense? Cool. I take your silence as a yes. I'll answer one more question. Does anyone else have any questions?
I do, if anybody else doesn't.
Still, yes. My wife is angry. All you guys hear is just my angry way.
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, you're still teaching?" She's
Cool
like,
now.
she always like forgets that this is like my job or something.
Mm-hmm. I know what that feels like, man.
Yeah, she's very supportive. It's just funny that she just rather be in bed, which I understand too. She's like, "Why do you talk so long?" It's like it's part of the deal. Like I'm a teacher. I like to make sure people get good lessons, you know.
Well, there's something that I could say about that. I could perhaps add to your work, but I'll leave it to the next session, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. What was the question?
Yes, right. In the morning group, you mentioned that realistic design is something that you advise against for some reason, and that I remember that because I am actually trying to to develop realistic thumbnails and realistic characters.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that? Could you just develop on that so that I can understand better?
Yeah, no, I mean like realistic, like a person just wearing a t-shirt or like a military soldier, something that I can literally just go online and get a reference for now, or a 3D model even. Okay. Like I'm talking about like, don't design something that I can just get for free, or I can spend like $15 and I got like a thing. You know what I mean? So if you go to like something like this, where in the past you could, in the past I think it was fine, right? But now it's like, you know, why design a human face like realistically? Like why paint a realistic face when you can just go to this website and just get a realistic face? And it's like, well, you know, maybe I want like a very specific style. Like these are all 3D. You can move the vertices around, you know, and you can get pretty cool and convincing results actually, right? You just need to kind of like base complexion and then just start from there, right? And just to show you like how crazy this is, like I got this model, right? And what got me was this GIF right here. Not all that stuff. This right here. Whereas it's not even not even the geometry of the head changes, just the details of the features and where the placement of like the eyebrows and complexion. But this looks like different people, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And then I took this into a 3D software and I actually manipulated it, and it's the same argument. Like you have like a different person. So like, why would I go about designing?
What website is that?
It's called 1024 is where I Googled. And then from there, you can go to this website. But I can just send this to you.
3D Scan Store. Okay,
yeah, I can just send this to you right now in the Skype chat.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you see all these people blender 3D, like, realistic environments and stuff, too. It's just, like, because it's easier, you know? Like, you go to websites like Quixel. Whoops. Right? Where they have all these 3D assets that are just free.
Wow.
But it's all realistic stuff. You know, this person built this whole environment using almost entirely their free library.
Could you send that to us, please?
Yes, of course. And it's all free. This is all free.
Yeah.
I think
So it
it's
comes
free
down
if you're using the Unreal Engine, but it's also just free if you're just using it in general. And it's because Epic owns them now; they're partners, and so it's just free.
So do you agree that you can use real references of real stuff, real equipment, and real people, and still make something that doesn't look like it already exists?
Yeah, if it doesn't exist, then that's the way to go around it. But if you're like, for instance, that little hallway, like, why would I concept that? I'll just probably make it. And even then, like, if I'm a smart art director, why would I make my concept artist concept that? Why don't I just make it myself or have my environment guys do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the point of going through the concept phase? Why can't I just look for a photo like online and that has like kind of the ideas that I like, right? And then just have them build off of that. So the whole idea of concept is to save time, right? Because if people don't have an idea or a direction, then it's going to be much more challenging, okay, to like make something. So when I say realism, I don't mean like realistic like this. This is realistic. But this is clearly designed. This is different, right? Like this does not exist. I have never seen an image like that in my life until I saw that image. Okay. You can't just Google skull Victorian zombie dude, right? And then just find something. You know what I mean?
I actually just texted that guy yesterday, Rory.
Yeah. Yeah, and like something like this is realistic. I don't mean like realistic in terms of rendering. I mean realistic in terms of like what is the final product realistically? Is it something that we can all just Google, or is it something that requires a little bit of finesse?
Because this may sound obvious to you, but for me and for perhaps other students in your class, the idea of concept art may not be as clear in the beginning as it should perhaps. So if I get it right, concept art is the whole foundation of concept art is about creating ideas and developing concepts, right?
Yeah.
Out of references. So why take something that already exists and portray that as a concept if it's not really
like I don't need to hire somebody to design a military soldier for Call of Duty. And if I did, it'd probably be like one or two people, and all they would be doing is just photo collaging of what already exists.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's not like I'm gonna have them really stretch their creative muscles as much as somebody who's asking to design an original monster design. You know?
Yeah.
That's for a live action film. That's realistic, but it's like we want an original monster. You know? That's where you want to be. You want to be in that camp of pedigree. You know? And the way to think about concept art in terms of a career or in terms of actual pipeline, I mean, you have like pre-production, you have production, and you have post. You got you got production, and then you got post-production. And so concept art usually lives right here. Sometimes it dives into production because sometimes some things just need more concepts. But it's usually the front lines. It's like the blueprints, the schematics. Someone writes down a dragon. Someone needs to draw a dragon, right? And then someone needs to make a 3D dragon, right? And then you put that 3D dragon into whatever the final product's supposed to be, like a still shot of a film or something, like blowing fire. Because this step and this step, you could probably just use two people, the writer and the artist. But to get to this stage, like this part right here, getting to the final 3D production and animated stuff, can easily be, depending on how high quality this is, can easily be 50 to 100 people to make this happen.
Yeah, that's what the manager of the CG school was telling me a couple of months ago. He told me that in most big studios, the number of concept artists, is not that high compared to, programmers and modelers and other people that work in technical stuff.
For now. it's only getting easier, dude. And so this idea of 50 to 100 people is starting to get down to like 15 to 50 people. And then eventually, I think in like, I'm calling it like 2025 and below or beyond. I mean,
really?
It's going to be like artists. Okay. Like I'm just going to be able to go into like a software like ZBrush or 3D Coat. Like I was just talking to a fellow instructor and he was showing me this other tool that just automates a lot of stuff. And I'm just like, this is fucking bonkers, dude. You know? But like, you know, I can come in here and sculpt something.
Like ZBrush.
Like ZBrush. Hold on. Actually, I think I have a better. Which one is the one that I made? Yeah, this one. You know, I can go in here and create something. Right? However I want, right?
Like ZBrush, man. What the?
And it's even better than ZBrush because it's a proper 3D software, so I can actually put like actual materials, you know, not like fake ass materials.
What?
And so
3D Coat, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I can change I can change the lighting. It's like real HDR lighting. But anyway, like so I can get like a good impression of what this would actually look like, the final result of this, right? You know what I mean? Like I can kind of you know, I can cut this out because 3D Coat is like a proper 3D tool that uses voxels too.
Whoa. Oh yeah, look at that.
And so you can do some fancy stuff.
Very nice textures.
You know? And then like normally you would have to go through the pipeline of unwrapping it or like creating a low poly, unwrapping it, rigging it, animating it. But a lot of those tools are just becoming seamless, dude, you know? And it's like you can just probably, even the rigging part, like you could probably just use your phone and use automatic motion capture, like just from you moving around and using AI, you know? And so this idea of like designing for super photorealistic stuff and like even working on a pipeline that I think is going to be extinct soon, you know? That's why I'm trying to say, like, you want to be in the forefront of somebody. When people are hiring you, they're hiring you for your ideas. You get it? Like, and however you convey those ideas, whether it's through 3D, whether it's through Photoshop, Blender, it doesn't matter. Like, it's because you're just a badass idea generator. So choosing concept art, I think, is a good idea for the most part for most of you guys, because I think it's going to be like one of the last jobs to go. Because I even still think that concept art will be a job that will go. Okay, meaning that I think that even concept art will die, and machines can do that too. You know, and hopefully by then we get our affairs in order as a species. Okay, but I highly doubt it, especially after seeing how we handled a lot of the current problems.
Yeah.
But
I'll ask you to develop on the future of 3D next time, because this of 3D and CG art in general, because this is something that I've been, you know, I want to make a living out of this. I want to switch from language education to CG art. So I need to know if this is coming to an end very soon or not, you know.
Just specifically like things that you can probably find for free or easily. Okay. Like I tell people, I think even in this class, I think someone had like a very Victorian aesthetic, and I suggested to add some more spice to it, right? Mm-hmm. Because of that specific reason. Specifically for that reason. What?
Would you say the same thing about my concepts too?
No, if I really believed that, I would have said something. You know.
Okay.
Like it's gotta be really like, if you're just like, it's like armor design and stuff like this, like that still has some value, but like it has to be like something that's so obviously easy to just steal. Okay, that I would say like there's still use for that. Like if you look at like Assassin's Creed and stuff like this, they have like a lot of concept artists who just do that and focus on that kind of stuff, right? Like one of my favorite artists, and I have to go. Well, I definitely have to go now. Who does like realistic concepts in a more, culturally influenced way. He still finds different interesting ways to evolve that aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
You understand?
I did.
So you just got to be able to do that as well. Okay.
Yeah, simple as that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a challenge. Like you just got to do something that it's not so easily adapted. And I also think like you should still find ways to like differentiate your work. All right. This is why I have consistently and constantly learned different tools and different techniques. Like right now I'm doing even more stylized because I also just think stylized is going to have a more of a value in the future because of like all the tools I just showed you. And I've always loved stylized. It's just now more reason to do it. I already am a pretty established artist, pretty established career, doing something already. That's probably has a lot of value for a long time. But I'm like, I can probably start adding some more skill to my abilities, But anyway, I'm going to roll out now, though. Appreciate you guys. Yeah. Don't worry. We'll have plenty of more Q&As moving forward. And then I'll see you guys on Wednesday of next week. Cheers, friends.
Perfect. Thank you, man. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate it. Please subscribe to watch more in the future. If you like the video, I would appreciate a thumbs up. If you like this content, you can go to my website, robotpencil.net, where you can find mentorships, tutorials, and a Patreon to get more exclusive content. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys in my next videos.